Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman, and we are going at this Mishna hard. We're still on chapter 2, Mishna 8, and today we got part 17, and we so appreciate Rabbi Coffman hanging in there, explaining the details. So let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. Rabbi Coffman, so good to be with you. I loved your Tanakh Talk episode last week. It was wonderful. We hope you keep it going, and thanks for all that you do. You're live.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to be here. We are hitting this Mishnah pretty strong, no question about that. But there's no shortage of things to talk about. So we're still speaking about the more counsel, the more understanding, right? And there's a person who gets good advice. We said before, way back when, probably maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, kanucha rav, right? Oseucha rav, kanucha chaver. To make for yourself a rabbi, you should acquire a friend, right? Now, rabbi here doesn't necessarily mean somebody on the same level, right? Someone greater than you. Sorry, let's say better, right? It could be someone on the same level, but you're hashing ideas. You want to see if what you're saying is true or not.
Teacher, though, yes.
So we're going to speak about learning, together with somebody, and how that works. But the idea is that, you want to hash out some, a question or something you think. You want to see if it's really true or whatever the case is. So what do? Is you get somebody to, to hash it out with. Now, this person, some of the commentaries say, when it says the Seiv Charav, make for yourself a rabbi, it doesn't mean necessarily someone who's greater in knowledge. It could be someone even lesser in knowledge, right? But they have the ability, you're, throwing the idea out there. And a lot of times, teachers learn more from their students, right? From the questions that their students ask, right? Sure. They become more sharp, right? They become definitely more sharp.
Able,
no question. Yeah. And over here, learning from someone who knows less, but they make a valid point. They give good information, etc. And that helps you understand things. That helps you understand things further, right? So now comes on Rabbeinu Yonah. I don't think we hit Rabbeinu Yonah last week. Rabbeinu Yonah of Gerondi, right? Famous Rabbeinu Yonah, who wrote Shari Tshuva, Gates of Repentance, major commentary in the Talmud, as well. Rabbeinu Yonah explains, person learns Torah, and he wants to understand it. Right? Torah is not easy. There are many, many things in Torah where we say, 80% of the Torah doesn't make rational sense, right, in general. So we have to put our mindsets into what the Torah wants from us. Now, that's not so easy. Now, the reason it's not so easy because, there are a lot of concepts. The temple, the vessels in the temple, the vestments of the temple, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, has to wear. We got sacrifices, we got purity and impurity.
Minutia,
what I'll call in my language, spiritual cooties. And we got other things that we think make sense to a certain extent. But again, it's very deep, and there are multiple levels over here, right? One example, the Torah tells me you're not allowed to steal. Are you going to say, all right, that's obvious, right? So in the 10 Commandments, Torah also gives the command not to steal. Say, don't I already know that? Torah already tells me before. The Torah already tells me before. Torah doesn't tell me anything, anything that, is superfluous. So even non-Jews, no-hides, have to keep, the no-hide laws. So one of the no-hide laws is what? It's about stealing. But in the 10 Commandments, it doesn't mean to steal. Right? The word, the verse over there that says don't steal means don't kidnap. So now people are going to jump on me and say, hey, come on. That's not a simple explanation. That's oral law. You're right. It's oral law. Karaites, be a little bit upset about that. But the Karaite's going to have to come up with an answer. Why does it say again? Why does it say don't steal again? They say, oh, maybe it's emphasis. Maybe, I don't know, whatever it is. They have to come up with an answer. They have to come up with an answer as well. But there are things that make sense. That even make sense. Don't kill. Right? Also one of the 10 commandments. Also makes sense. Right? Also no heights. Obligated. And they're not allowed to kill, etc. But then someone will ask, okay, what about euthanasia? Isn't euthanasia not murder? Grandpa was gonna die anyway. Right? And he's suffering. So we're gonna pull the plug. So we're gonna do something like that. That's not murder, that's mercy. Ah, mercy, really? We hold it's murder. And what about an abortion? No, a woman has the right to do what she wants with her body. Yeah, there's only one problem after a certain point. When she's pregnant, that's
a new life.
That fetus is called a living entity, which we, the Jewish people, hold is after 40 days. Before 40 days, not really considered a living entity. After 40 days, considered a living entity. So now the question is, stopping a pregnancy. So that's a complicated issue, right? It depends on a lot of factors, right? But in general, it's forbidden, right? In general, it's forbidden. Don't say, oh, what about rape? What about this? Okay, there are issues. There are issues when a person finds out, the child's going to have all kinds of deformities and this and that. They wouldn't be able to handle it or whatever the case is psychologically. So again, you need to ask someone with much bigger shoulders than me, these type of questions. But you're going to say, come on, and murder's murder. No, it's not. Rabbeinu Yonah, we mentioned, I just actually spoke about this a little bit last week from my subscription website on Shari Tshuva, which I'm actually in the Ageres Tshuva, literally the letter of repentance at the end of the book. It's really a separate part of Shari Tshuva. Regardless, says over there the terrible sin of embarrassing someone in public. Now, a person embarrasses someone in public, you lose your portion of the world to come.
Wow.
That's how severe it is. Now,
Huge.
the problem is that embarrassing someone in public is bad. I don't think there's any question it's bad. But at the same time, why do I say it's murder? Why would the Talmud say it's murder? Because when you embarrass someone, they turn white, then they turn red. Right? Or they turn red, they turn white. Right? And I think it's the other way around. They turn white, then they turn red. Right? Now, red, what does that represent? Blood. It's as if you murdered them. Now, the problem is the Rambam and others say, you don't lose your portion of the world to come for such a thing. Right? Now, this is a tremendous novelty by Rabbeinu Yonah. Why? Because if you tell me murder itself, according to most rabbinical authorities, person, God forbid, murdered someone, you don't lose your portion of the world to come. How can it be an offshoot? And at best, it's an offshoot of murder, i.e. embarrassing someone in public. How can you tell me that you lose your portion of the world to come? That's a huge novelty. Huge novelty. In other words, if murder itself you're not liable, why would you be liable for something that's at best an offshoot of that? A little bit hard to understand, but again, Rabbeinu Yonah is consistent. He brings it down in Shari Tshuva, brings it down the gates of repentance, and he brings it down also in this letter of repentance. Right? It says the same thing. Right? So mentioned that when I gave this over to myself, I had a great time. Right? I always enjoy giving like I make my Parsha video and I yell and scream into a screen and there's nobody there. Just me, myself, and I, all three of us. Civil complex, right? So then, put it on YouTube and this on my subscription website over there. But again, I said the same thing that I mentioned when Rabbeinu Yonah said it before. And the same thing was, how can it be? You're liable for something that at best is an offshoot of murder, which isn't murder, and you lose your portion of the world to come. Right? That is showing you the severity of the sin of embarrassing someone. And a person say, oh, I was just joking, take it so seriously, don't be so don't take it to heart. I was only kidding. Don't be so sensitive. That's what I was thinking. Don't be so sensitive, but you murdered someone. That person who got embarrassed in front of others, very hard to get that sense of dignity back. right? Similarly, somebody, and this is a whole huge topic in of itself, and that is about bullying. Person gets bullied, in school, whatever, growing up, and a lot of times, they don't deal with it, and what do? They take it out on others, right? Just like, God forbid, a pedophile. And pedophiles, everyone should know, they're in every community, whether Christian communities, secular communities, religious communities, across the board, right? This is a disease. I don't think there's any question. But people who deal with this state clear that when it comes to pedophilia in general, pedophilia itself, why does someone do it? I mean, it's not a normal urge. There's no question about that. Certainly not a normal urge. At the same time, I've heard a number of people say that the reason they do it to others because they had it done to them. In other words, I don't know, some sort of
perpetuates.
Yeah, perpetuates. It's some sort of reaction that happens by somebody, that they were acted upon, not their choice, right? Certainly not their choice. I don't think anyone asked for it, right? In general, certainly not their choice, right? And
would that be the sins of the fathers reach into the second and third and fourth generation?
So that could be an issue, except for the fact that the Gemara says that when you say the sins of the parents go on the children, that's only if the children go in the bad ways of the parents. In other words, if the bad character traits of the parents are acted out by the children, that curse applies. If not, that curse won't apply. Now, I can't think of anything worse, not too many things worse, than a parent doing it to their child. One thing, okay, you do it to another child, bad enough. Person does it to their own child, and there are stories, many stories, grandfathers with grandkids. I mean, it's, keep it in the family. Why not? They destroyed. They're absolutely destroyed. There are people that get crippled, by these type of actions, by being embarrassed in public, right? Psychological actions against them, physical actions against them. And what's the $1 million question I hear many, many times? I don't even know why I'm talking about this. Really not the topic for now, but I think it's an important issue. And that is, people say, but why did it have to happen to me? Right? That's the first question. Why did it have to happen to me? And the second question is, how am I supposed to deal with it? Now, so the answer is that why did it have to happen to a person? Now, let's say it's a child. We'll make it very easy. A child under the age of bar or bat mitzvah, they're not liable. They haven't done anything wrong, right? And even if they've done something wrong, they are not liable as an adult. Now, could be, if a child breaks somebody's window, could be the parents, beyond the letter of the law should pay for it. Why? Because, okay, the child did something wrong, caused damage. Technically speaking, they don't have to pay. I'm not saying children should go around breaking windows and causing damage. Certainly not. Right? But at the same time, according to the technical letter of the law, comes the Jewish law, they're not liable because they're underage. Now, we mentioned this before, but we'll mention again because all good things bear to be repeated. And that is that if something happens to a child, let's say a child is born mentally challenged, Down syndrome, child is born with leukemia, right? Or they get leukemia later, or whatever the case is. People say that, you can't say that child's being punished. You're right. Right? At least by secular people, I would agree. It's not the fault of the child. 100%. They're going to say, well, God doesn't know what he's doing, God forbid. No. You're right, it's not the fault of the child. So why does it happen? Why does something like that happen? It's not punishment. It can't be punishment. The child's underage, right? Punishment only happens over the age of 13 until 20. Right? A person can be punished for what they've done at the age of 20, even after bar mitzvah. Right? Not necessarily at 13, but even without going into that, what does it show? It shows the child's not liable. if it shows that the child's not liable, because, again, it's not punishment, then what's going on? Now, what will secular people say? It's your bad luck. It's your bad luck. Anyone who's ever read the book, which I don't recommend because it's absolute heresy, and that is When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Right? Howard Kushner writes his book, right? Becomes world famous, wrote a whole bunch of other books, New York Times bestseller. And anyone who doesn't know the story of the book, he had a son, tragically had the disease of progeria. The disease of progeria, anyone doesn't know, is that it's like a 10-year-old in the body of an 80-year-old. Right? It's just a quick aging disease, and the child doesn't live very long. So basically his conclusion was, and he's a conservative rabbi to boot, but his conclusion was that, I looked into my deeds, I'm not such a bad guy. My wife, no, not such a bad woman. So it must be God doesn't run the world. That was his conclusion. Now, in my ebook about my life story, right? I had to read this when I was in college. So I, obviously I had an issue with this because for some reason I believe that, God created the world, he runs the world, he's in charge of the world. So that doesn't make sense. Not only that, but if you read the last 2 chapters of the book of Job, where God chastises him and talks about all the things that he does, and he plays with the Leviathan, and he takes these birds that the mother birds throw them out, and they're supposed to die, and God saves them, like all these different things. He's like, Job, can you do that? No. Job, can you do this? No. So Job, shut your big mouth. You don't have anything to say. I'm the one who runs the world, God says. Right? So in my ebook, and I'll say it now, no one should ever have to go through such a trial. Right? Seeing a child in front of you, wither away and all that. Nobody, should want that, even for their worst enemy. Even so, what did he do? He says, well, stuff happens. Right? And if stuff happens, that means, God forbid, God's not in control. Right? That was his conclusion. Now, why did he say that? He said it very simply because he's taking the onus off of us. He's taking the onus off of the fact that I'm responsible for my actions. Now, it might not come now, it might come later, it might come before. We're not in control, we don't know. The Mishna in Pirkei Avos, we'll get to when I'm 95, says you're born against your will, you die against your will. And in parentheses, Coffman would say, you still have to live. Do I have a choice who my parents are? No. Do I have a choice who my siblings are? No. Socioeconomic situation? No. And if a person's born feeble and other things, diseased or whatever, is anyone in control of that? No one's in control. No one's in control. Maybe certain things they found out might be able to, do surgery in vitro and do other things. Certain things you can't change. Child's going to come out Down syndrome. You can't change that. There's no way to fix it. Now, it could be person, child's born, problem with the heart. Other things could be. Other things can be done, right? But if a child, grows up, and all of a sudden they get, they get cancer, leukemia, whatever, what are people going to ask? What's the question? People are going to ask, what's going on? If God is all good, that's the question of all suffering. If God is all good, that's what we mentioned in the book of Job. If God is all good, then why do these things happen? And the answer is we don't know why these things happen. But we do know, according to Kabbalah, we do know that a soul can come back and can suffer in this world and be paid back for things it did previously and given the opportunity to get fixed up. Right? That's what we know. I mean, how do we know that? Well, Kabbalah tells us a story. Right? And we've heard also stories of people that had out-of-body experiences, different things. They also tell, stories like that. So you want to tell me thousands of people had out-of-body experiences that all say the same thing according to Kabbalah? They're all whack jobs? It's a little bit hard to say. If you tell me it's one person, 2 people, maybe it's 5 people, they all say the same thing. They see the soul hover over the body. They're drawn to this great light. They see their life flash before their eyes. All these different things. What do you think? They're all crackpots? They all saw the same thing? All 5 of them? What if there's 1,000? Right? I get better. I'll say better. What if there are 20? What if 20 people had the same experience? You can't just knock that off. You can't say, oh, that's a coincidence. Like a cousin of my wife's.
I know, but
Israeli.
they look at the question of falsifiability, right? Is it falsifiable or not? Yeah, that's where skepticism is justified.
So a secular Israeli cousin of my wife's, we had discussion once, about 39 Scud missiles during the Gulf War. What are the odds? What are the odds they don't hit anything? They just hit open areas. They don't hit a building. They don't hit a car. They don't hit a telephone pole. So if they're so close and these missiles supposed to be so accurate, right? It's either got the stupidest Arabs in the world who are shooting them. That's a possibility, right? Definitely a possibility. But I said, okay. I said, if you tell me one missile gets fired, doesn't hit anything. Okay. 2 missiles get fired, doesn't hit anything. Okay. When you get to 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, you can't say, wow, that's just a coincidence, right? So what does this person do? He takes off his watch, right? Well, they still have Casio watches like this. Takes off his Casio watch, right? And starts pushing buttons. I said, what, are you kidding? What if the odds are 1 in a billion? If the odds are 1 in a billion, I would put all my money down. I'd make a mint, because it's never going to happen. 39 missiles. And you're going to tell me every single one is going to hit dirt. And that's all it's going to hit. It's going to hit dirt. It's going to hit a field. Maybe it'll hit a pumpkin
while it's
patch.
Being aimed elsewhere, yeah.
The odds of that are 0. 0. Right. But what does the person say? See, it could still happen. I said, what do you mean it could still happen? The odds are 0. I would be a millionaire, multi-billionaire. Right? I'd put all my money down. If someone were to tell me, an example I give, if you're playing roulette, and you know 70% of the time, I'll just say 70%, it can even be less. 70% of the time you spin that wheel, it's going to be black 13. Now, if you're going to win 70% of the time, guess what? You are going to be a multi-billionaire. You're not going to be working all night long. You love those odds. I take those odds, I'll take 60% on. I'll take 60% on. 60% of the time, you're going to be right. 6 out of 10, you're going to make a lot of money. You're going to make a lot of money. If you want to tell me a 0% chance, it's a 0% chance. 0.0000, maybe 1, somewhere down the line. About 50,000 zeros. Go back to watching The Matrix, right? About 50 billion zeros. Never going to happen.
Yeah.
So
I've worked a lot with probability math and
right. Yeah. So people say, listen, you can manufacture statistics. You can use statistics for what you want. You're right. I happen to like statistics. I'm big into numbers, as most people know. But something like this, where the odds are so small, right? Again, we'll throw it back to the question of, it's either you believe in evolution or you believe in God. There's nothing in between, right? There's 0 in between. So you got Stephen Hawking, you got Einstein, you got others who don't have proof according to science. How do you explain an expanding universe, right? We mentioned this also before. They don't have an answer. So I would say, okay, Steve, Al, I want an answer scientifically. Give me an answer how you explain there's an expanding universe according to science.
Well, right now they say dark energy.
So what are they going to say? They're going to say, okay, you're right. We're going to find the answer. Science eventually will explain it, but we don't have an answer right now. So now, what would Coffman say to them? I'd say, Steve, Al, it's been a pleasure. You only have one other alternative. You only have one other alternative to explain how this works. You know what that other alternative is? It's called Genesis. It's called the first book of the Bible. That's the only other alternative. You don't have any other alternative? No. We're not going down that path.
Science is only methodology. Methodology of nature. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter what it is. What they're going to say is, what they have said is, I will never, ever let the Bible thumpers, my language, have the upper hand. We're never going to believe in that. But you don't have a proof otherwise. Not science, not math. You don't have any proof in order to show.
But you can't flip that coin and say something valid is invalid.
If you don't have proof, if you don't have proof, then at least you have to entertain the possibility. Because if you're open-minded until your brains fall on the floor, give me another explanation. right? Some people will say, I had all the miracles in Egypt. Forget about God. Forget about all these other things. Saturn was out of orbit. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't. But you're grasping for straws. Because if you say Saturn is out of orbit, what do you do with most of the book of Exodus? Why does God say, I'm going to show my power and I'm going to show my might? He's going to say, no, that scientifically could explain what God did. That everything was out of orbit. Come on, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I can sell you cheap. Also doesn't make sense. But that's degrading what the truth is. And people don't want to look at the truth. They do everything else and jump around the truth, right? And all that. So a lot of things that may not necessarily make sense. I'll give another example, right? You take eating milk and meat. Take eating milk and meat. The Torah says you're not allowed to kill a calf in its mother's milk. From there, the Torah says it 3 times. So why does the Torah tell it to us 3 times? Okay, I have to bring an oral law over here. Carrots can jump up and down. But they say because you're not allowed to cook it even if you don't eat it. You're not allowed to derive benefit from it, right? And you're not allowed to eat it. 3 things. But what's the problem? The problem is if I have kosher meats and I have kosher milk, and all of a sudden I put them together and I put them over a flame, and now there's a heat element. I've now made a Torah prohibition if it's kosher meat and kosher milk. If I put them together over fire, that's a Torah prohibition. What happened over here? Everything else is rabbinical, right? Non-kosher meat, kosher milk, or kosher milk and non-kosher meat, or whatever the case is, right? That's all rabbinical. It's also milk and meat together, right? But the point is, why? Why should it be forbidden? Again, I have 2 separate elements. Both elements, if they're kosher, are permitted. All of a sudden, I put them together through heat, technically speaking. If I put a hamburger that's cold on top of cheese, that is cold. I can't eat them together. Still not allowed to eat them together. But all I have to do is wash off the meat, maybe cut around like a sliver of the meat, about an inch, let's say. Wash off the cheese, cut around it, and I could eat the cheese, wash out my mouth, and then eat meat. Why is that not forbidden? Because they're cold, right? They're cold. If one of them was hot and they gave off heat to the other, that's a prohibition. That's a mixture of milk and meat. So the $1.5 million question, because I'm sick of asking $1 million questions, $1.5 million question is, why should it be forbidden? Kosher meat, kosher cheese. I put them together through heat. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Most of the Torah itself, as we mentioned before, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it doesn't make sense, there are so many different elements underneath it.
Right.
Right? Said about stealing and about murder and about other things that there's so many things, underneath it. It's all decree. It's all a divine decree. And if we'd understand in general that everything is a divine decree, we never sin. 100% we never sin. Why? Because we understand what's going on, right? 100%, we understand what's going on. We don't have a clue. Sorry, we don't have a clue. We don't have a clue. What's going on. I just want to deal with one question here. Somebody asked, why aren't these horrific things mentioned in the Big Ten? Right? In other words, pedophilia. Pedophilia is not mentioned as one of the 10 commandments. Adultery, no question about it. Right? It's mentioned. Immorality. Right? Many times, immorality is spoken about. Go to the book of Leviticus chapter 18. Right? You got more than 20 verses talking about immorality. And in between those verses, what do I have? Homosexuality. Right? It's also in there. Bestiality I have. Bestiality's in there. So why aren't these things mentioned as part of the 10 commandments? Because adultery is a general term. Right? Immorality mentioned many, many times. But why would the Torah necessarily have to mention such a perversion as one of the 10 commandments? The Torah can tell me don't covet. Right? That's a huge thing. The Torah can tell me don't murder. Also a big thing. But when I say pedophilia is in the top 10, I wouldn't necessarily have thought that. God thinks idolatry is pretty bad. Number of commandments against idolatry, right? Honoring Shabbos, that's pretty big. And if you don't honor Shabbos as a Jew, right, it's like you deny God. Well, it makes you a heretic. That's why secular Jews, if they don't keep Shabbos, they desecrate Shabbos in public, can't drink their wine. Can't drink wine, they touch, unless it's cooked, right? Unless it's pasteurized, according to many rabbinical authorities. Spiritual cooties, nah, right? Whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to call it, but that's pretty severe. That's definitely pretty severe. Coveting, that's going to destroy everybody. That's our desire, right? That I can understand is pretty severe, right? Adultery, immorality, also pretty severe. Definitely pretty severe. These are normal things in general, right? The first number you have between man and God, the last between man and man, right? Now, why would I think in general, something that's such a perversion, why should it make in the top 10? You might argue, what about homosexuality? Yeah, how common is homosexuality? Now, I don't know statistics. I'm going to be talking out of my elbow here, right? But how common is homosexuality today? You want to tell me it's 40% of the population?
No.
I think that would be pretty high. You want to tell me it's 20% of the population? I also think it'd be pretty high, right? If you're talking about 3 billion people, then you're talking about 300 million people that are homosexuals. I'll throw in lesbians there also, right? Bestiality not as common, so I'm not going to add it. Even between them, how big? You want to tell me it's in the tens of millions, hundreds of millions? I think it's high. I think it's very high.
Well, there's
so
purity in not naming it, right?
If it's something that's a perversion, what does the Torah call it? An abomination, right? Not the people necessarily, the act. If it's an abomination and a perversion, that's not the norm, right? Even though it was going on before the flood and, animals had to get wiped out because of things that man had influence over animals. It wasn't animals' fault, right? But we see that, how are you going to leave the animals around and, then all of a sudden say, hey, look, these people died. Look, the animal's still alive. Still an embarrassment, right? So God took away the animals also. All these species of animals, whatever the case is. So if it's something that's such a perversion and not a natural inclination, it's not going to be in the top 10. Now, some people may say, and I've heard, some doctors may say, they've isolated a gene. Someone told me this probably more than 20 years ago, right? They've isolated a gene. It's called the homosexual gene, right? So I said, well, that's great. Even if they isolated it, does that mean a person has to act on it? I have a lot of bad genes. Anger genes, miserly genes, lazy genes, many genes we have. So what if we're wired that way? And God wired us that way. So he makes us more susceptible to these things. True. Does he want me to act on it? No. Right, but a person can have a claim and get out, get upstairs after 120 years. And what would the claim be? Claim would be, why are you going to punish me? You made me this way. Now, let's say that's true. Let's say we didn't do it to ourselves. Let's say this is the way we're programmed. So you're going to say, what? I don't have free will? Of course you have free will. But you're more susceptible. God says, you're right. I wired you that way. I didn't tell you to do it. Mike Tyson, we'll quote him here. Right? So he got accused of rape. And what was his defense? Can't believe Alan Dershowitz put him on the stand. Right? Well, what did he say? He said, listen, this woman was in my hotel room at 3 a.m. and everybody knows I'm an animal. Convicted. So what if you're an animal? Let's say that's true, right? Let's say we'll take him at face value. 100% true. So that means he has the right to do whatever he wants. He doesn't have a right to do whatever he wants. Right? And he got convicted like he should have. Exactly like he should have. Everyone knows I'm an animal. Very good. So what? So what if you're wired that way? We're all wired a certain way. We may take these things on later, based on other things we do. But guess what? Regardless of how it's done, regardless of what, our biases may be, even if we're wired that way, etc., God says, you're right. Okay, so now you have to fight that much more harder against it. And you have to work harder not to do it. Right? So if you do this to yourself, I'll say even better. You do it to yourself. You're not wired this way. But you get into different desires, different things, and you realize now, it's a bad thing to do. It's a bad habit, this and that. So you're working with derelicts and drug addicts or whatever. You don't think every drug addict knows it's bad to do drugs? Of course they know. They're not stupid, but that's how they deal with life.
I found a big bag full last night on my rounds. I found a bag of crystal meth. And of course, our policy is I have to have another staff member with me, and we dispose of it, right? But yeah, I mean, you just don't want somebody else to find it, right? And
no, 100%. But I'm saying these people, if you were to ask them in general, before they shoot up, before they do any drugs or whatever they're doing, that's bad. And you ask them, is this the way a person should act in this world? Forget about religion in general, right? The vast majority.
Oh, they have no conscience. Yeah, they don't. Yeah.
Well, what should the vast majority say? They'll say you're 100% right, but this is the way I deal with life. I've had this happen, that happened, the other thing happened, and this is the way I deal with life. But deep down, I don't care if they have a conscience or not, deep down, if you'd pin them down, you'd really pin them down. Is this the way I should act in life or not? If they're going to be truly honest, they're going to say, no, this is not good. It's destructive. It's wrong. It's wrong. For whatever reason they say, right? But it's wrong. So therefore what? They're going to say, what can I do? This is the way it happened. This is the way I'm programmed. Well, no one is programmed from the very beginning.
But isn't there a degree of hardness of heart in there, right? I mean, addiction is usually due to a degree of hardness of heart.
Yeah, but the problem is when at the beginning of Parshas Bo, book of Genesis, it says God hardened Pharaoh's heart, right? God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Now, what's the obvious question? The obvious question is, if his heart is already hardened, why is God going to punish him? He's got no free will. His free will was totally taken away. Now, the Rambam goes to great length to try and explain why he gets punished anyway. Because if he's got free will, that's one thing. He's making a choice. Here, he's not making a choice. Here, the choice is taken away from him. Even if he wanted to change. And his people around him say, listen, get rid of these people. They're decimating the country. They're doing, we're getting destroyed over here. And he says, I don't care. He says, I don't care. He says, this is what's going to happen. Hitler yamach shemoy v'zichroi. May his name be blotted out, may he rot. Right? He was losing the war. And his generals came and said, listen, forget the cattle cars. We need to take supplies to the front. We're going to get decimated otherwise. And what did Hitler say? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. My goal is systematically to wipe out every single Jew that exists. Oh, we might lose the war. We need supplies. So you're going to say, well, he was a nut job. You're right. Many ways he was a nut job. But at this point, God is turning the screws and he says, okay, we're going to, I'm going to put that in your mind. And I'm going to add, because that's the beginning of the end. Because once he's not supplying the front, he gets decimated. It's only a matter of time before they're going to have to surrender. But it doesn't matter, but it's not normal. It's not the normal way to think. If you're getting decimated at the front, you got to give supplies. Forget about what your other goals are. You're going to kill your own men in the process, and Hitler didn't care. He cared about one thing. That's all. And that was the beginning of the end. Right? So you take so here, okay, so God hardened his heart over here in order to finally bring him down. That's how they brought him down. That's eventually how he got weakened, and that was the end of the war. At that point. But we should also think, I've heard my Rebbe say this a number of times, we should also think if we're steeped in desire, and we just keep doing the same thing over, maybe it's worse, maybe not. What about our own free will? At that point, do we have free will? Now, this is a much bigger question. It's a much harder question. Why? Because you got to say, but I'm making choices. When a person's steeped in desire, and they keep doing the same thing over and over at different levels, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, whatever it is, but it's an addiction. Whatever that addiction is, whether it's an internet addiction, it's a drug addiction, it's a gambling addiction, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. In any case, maybe at that point where a person, spirals out of control, maybe catches themselves, maybe not. But when a person is spiraling out of control, they're not in control. They've lost control, right? Take someone who's a drug addict or a gambling addict. When do they finally go for help? When they hit rock bottom, when they've lost everything. They've lost family, friends, and they're out in the street, pretty much. Now, it doesn't have to be that way, but what happens? The person's never going to admit they have a problem. They're going to say, I can fix this whenever I want. Tell a smoker that. Smoker say, I can stop anytime. Problem is, he's injecting himself with nicotine. Nicotine's addictive. Very hard to stop. Very hard to stop. So in such a case, how do we know, as my Rebbe would say, about us? How do we know if we're steeped in desire? How do we know that our free will has been taken away? Isn't that something we have to be afraid of? Come on, come tomorrow, right? Sunday, big day, biggest day of the year in professional sports, right? I'm going to be giving 5 classes, 4 classes, whatever it is, right? It's the biggest day of the year. That's why they sell, biggest game of the year. They sell advertising, for $1 million or more for 30 seconds.
You heard Tom Brady retired, eh?
That I heard, yeah. So, a lot of people crying, but okay, listen, it's 45, right? Got to retire at some point, right? Football! You got all these different things, and it's going to be a whole day of fear that people are going to waste time. 300 million people are going to watch this stupid game. It's probably not even going to be a good game, right? Maybe it'll be less people watch it.
Well, you got LA and Cincinnati?
Yeah, whatever the case, listen, you don't have marquee people in the game, in the final game. They're not really marquee people, right? If you had Kansas City there, it might have been one thing. If you had Tampa in there, it might have been one thing. Okay. So, it's going to, whatever it's going to be.
LA is LA, though. It's in LA, isn't it?
I understand.
It's a big town.
But I'm saying in the bigger scheme of things, the biggest players, you don't have the biggest players in this game. You just don't. You don't have the marquee names. But that doesn't matter. Point is, 300 million people are going to watch this game. The only game that's watched more is the World Cup. Right? I think the World Cup is it's more international, certainly, than American football. But whatever, it doesn't matter. I digress here. Right? But the point is, it's a whole day of fear. You got the pregame show. You got the game. It's a late game. Right? What time does it start? Like 6 o'clock at night. Eastern time or 6:30. Whatever it is, it's going to go to 11:30. It's a whole thing.
Rabbi, I watched a show the other day on the top 10 Super Bowl commercials of all time.
Yeah.
And of course, you'd recognize the number one. It was that Coca-Cola Mean Joe Green commercial.
Yeah, that's famous. Yeah. Famous.
I think from 79 or 80 or something like that. Yeah.
Right. So the whole thing, when you look at these things, is the person's going to say, well, it's Super Sunday, so we're going to get together with friends. And we're going to watch the game. Now, there are going to be people out there saying, I don't care. What do I care about football? I'm not a football fan. I don't care if my team's in it. Irrelevant. Those people are far and few between, right? If someone's going to say, listen, I'm going to have nothing to do with it. I'm not interested. I'm not giving in to this whole mentality. Who's going to do that? You get caught up in the culture, right? Certainly in America, you get caught up in the culture, right? Because it's all around you. Commercials, who's going to win, who's spinning it this way, that way. It's going to be Cincinnati. It's going to be LA. In Vegas, has odds and all kinds of things. Who's the first one to touch the ball? Who's the first one to throw an interception? Who's the first one, whatever. Score so many points in a quarter. Million things. It's a big day. But the problem is, when it comes to society, maybe else people will do this on Tanakh Talk tomorrow. People get so sucked into society, they don't even realize what's happening to them. Right? Like, a person can say, I have nothing to do with this. You tell a sports fan. Someone's been a sports fan, a good part of their life. You say, just give it up cold turkey. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen because it's part of their psyche. Got to watch the game. I don't care if it's a bad game, right? During COVID, there weren't any live games. So people were so desperate. I heard they were watching Korean baseball. No offense, anyone who likes Korean baseball. That's pretty desperate.
Yeah.
That's pretty desperate.
Subpar golf.
But again, it's addicting. It's fun. It's this and that. But we get sucked in. Not all the things that are addicting are bad. It's certainly not bad, right? Someone will say, well, isn't it better being into this than in other things? Okay. but, so you're talking, what's worse? Is this worse, that worse? The point is that a person's brain's being shut off. A person gets so sucked in, their brain gets shut off. That's the point, right? That's exactly the point. So you're going to say, wow, isn't pedophilia worse than desire, than coveting? Coveting property, coveting your neighbor's wife, coveting this, coveting. No, it's not. You know why? Because coveting leads to everything. It leads to desire for all kinds of things. Even if you can't have them, you go out of your way to try and get them. But you know what? Coveting also can change your whole mentality. You desire things, people that look at screens for people look at screens on a daily basis for hours on end. You think they want to sit down and learn Torah? You know how hard it is to restart the brain after it's been squeegeed, in my language? I'm not going to say impossible. It's really hard. What do you rather do? Get back and, watch The Matrix Revisited, or spend time trying to learn a difficult thing in Torah, right? I understand, right?
Yeah, sometimes I got to take the foot off the mental gas. It just is too much, too often.
You're right, but there are repercussions for doing that.
Sure.
Right, people have to understand their repercussions. But as my Rebbe says, how do we know we're not so sucked in that we're also, forget about being brainwashed, that we don't have free will now? Because you got, a person's going to fight with themselves. You got a 50-inch screen, 70-inch screen, right? I feel bad. People watch me on such a big screen.
The eye can't even discern 4K pixels.
You're going to hear me screaming like I blow out the speakers, like I did on Tanakh Talk a few times, right? So they're going to have this huge screen. Don't you think watching football or anything else on that screen is going to be a lot more fun than if you're watching on a dinky screen? Sure, right? Makes perfect sense. But tell somebody that, you really should change your mentality over here, because this is not going to give you anything. It's not going to help you in life, right? It's not going to give you good values. It's not going to draw you closer to God and all this. You know what people are going to say to me? They're going to say clear as day. They're going to say, just mind your own business. I'm going to enjoy this and I can have the best of both worlds. And the answer is, I tried to do that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Because if you have more feet in the secular world than you do in Torah, the Torah gets thrashed. You say, I keep Shabbos, I keep kosher, right? How much time do you spend learning? How much time do you spend doing acts of loving kindness? How much time, but if you see what's on the other side, what a person's doing, how much time they're wasting, doing other things, that takes away. So now, the man's going to say, listen, my brain needs a break. Life is hard, right? Okay. No one's going to deny that. No one's going to deny life is hard. At the same time, what does King David say? King David says, the person's going to live 70 years. Fame, I'm going to live forever. No, you're going to live 70 years. If you have strength, 80 years. Anything over that's a bonus. It's a bonus, right? We're going to see, again, probably when I'm 97, we're probably going to see, towards the end of the Mishna Pirkei Avos, it says when you hit 100, you're batel min olam. It's like you're nullified from the world. It's like you don't exist. So one of the great rabbis of the last generation lived to 106. So when he got to this mission, he says, I don't understand what it says. He was over 100. Right? He's like, I don't understand. Right? I'll tell you that story. I have to remind myself of that story when I'm 97, giving that oath. Right? But regardless, person thinks they're going to live forever. We're not going to live forever. We're only here for a certain amount of time. But as my Rebbe says, let's get back to the point. How do we know we don't have our free will taken away? Because a person can say, I can stop at any time. A person can say, this doesn't interest anymore, whatever. You know what? It comes back. And it comes back. Could come back stronger, could come back weaker, any of these things. But we may have our free will taken away because we're so steeped into desire. Now, after that explanation, someone still wants to say, come on, pedophilia is so bad, it should be in the top 10. Why in the world should it be in the top 10? Coveting is 10 times worse. 10 times worse. I agree. The act, pedophilia is disgusting. It destroys lives. I could go on and on. That's not really the point, right? It's a terrible thing. A terrible thing, no question about it. At the same time, you can say, well, isn't that
more to the root, right?
Doesn't that come under coveting? No. You know why it doesn't come under coveting? Because not a normal desire. What about immorality? Now, what does the Torah tell me about immorality? Right? It tells me who you're not allowed to be with. Leviticus chapter 18 that we read, by the way, on the afternoon service of Yom Kippur about immorality. But what does the Torah tell me about immorality? It tells me who you're not allowed to be with, and it tells me as well, a Jew, this should apply to a non-Jew also, not allowed to be with a homosexual, not allowed to be with an animal, right? An animal's not supposed to be in a woman, blah, blah, blah. Right now, you would tell me, somebody will tell me, come on. Why does the Torah mention that? Isn't that abnormal? Bestiality? Well, it definitely existed probably in Roman times, Greek times, right? It wasn't something unheard of. But if you break it down, even today, even in the decadent world that we live in today, is bestiality very common? No. It's not very common. Maybe in some places it's more common. Doesn't matter. It's extremely uncommon in general. But you know what? It existed enough, and God understood it's going to be an unnatural desire. And he says you don't have to do it, even if you have this unnatural desire, right? Pedophilia, totally unnatural desire. Doesn't make sense rationally at all. What is the person doing it? Again, I understand the desired effect, but the person is underaged, well underaged. If you're telling me two consenting adults, we can have a discussion, right? Premarital sex, is it immoral? It's not immoral. You get to know someone, whatever the case is, right? And I would say is a moral imperative. No, I shouldn't do it either. Spoken about that. So fine, that's two consenting adults. But now you want to tell me, a 6-year-old kid, a 5-year-old child, 7-year-old, they don't have knowledge for this type of thing. That's totally unnormal. That's totally not normal. I don't, and
it's predatory.
You're right, but I'm saying the after effect of what it does to the child is catastrophic. Totally, some people either commit suicide or, they do drugs or whatever. They feel it's all their fault when they're not in control, right? As you mentioned correctly, it's a predatorial type of thing. But again, even so, if you break it down, if you really break it down, this person, whoever's doing it, is a whack job because it doesn't make any rational sense. You're right. The person might be a predator, whatever. It's not a normal thing. And that's why many doctors out there, psychologists will say that the reason it's done is because most likely it happened to them. So they act on it because it happened to them. But back to the original point, it's not their fault because they're underage. It's not a punishment for them. It could be, I'll just throw this out there as an idea. It could very well be their soul in a previous life, bullied other people, right? Let's say they trampled on other people. So God says, okay, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to give you a chance to fix that up. How am I going to do that? I'm going to turn you into a rock, right? I'm going to turn you into a rock to get kicked around. You can't do anything. People are going to stamp on you, crush you, all these things. I'm going to take care of it that way. Or God can say, you know what? I'll take care of it another way. You bullied other people, forced them to do things they didn't want to do, right? I'm not even talking sexually here, whatever. So you know what? I'm going to give you a chance to fix that up. How am I going to do that? You're going to get abused in this world. You're going to have things done against you that you have no control over. Now, again, we look at it face value. We say it's not fair, whatever. Whatever the case is, that's what the soul has to go through.
Hashem does everything with absolute justice, yes?
No one in this world is going to sign up and say, yeah, I'm ready to do that. I'm ready to take that on. If you take a survey of all people who've been, this has happened to boys, girls, whatever. They become adults and say, well, would you have signed up for this for X, Y, and Z reason? No one's going to say yes. Nobody, because of the after effect and the embarrassment, and no one believes you, and they think you're trying to take someone down, and all these different things, right? So why does it happen? We don't know. But the point is, it's what the soul has to go. That's the only answer we have. The alternative would be, as Kushner said, stuff happens. It's my bad luck. Totally my bad luck, right? But this is pretty bad. I can understand financial upheavals. I can understand, I can understand people getting divorced and nasty divorces and other things. There are things that I could understand make more sense. A person not willing to change, they have anger issues, who knows? Many, many things. Comes to something like this, you can't explain it. You can't, it's just that someone will say, well,
don't
that
try to make
person-
sense of the senseless. Yeah.
that person, someone will say that person is evil incarnate. Now, God allows people to tap into evil, right? He created evil, as Isaiah says, even though the Christians changed the meaning of the verse, right? Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, right? He says over there that God created evil. Now, why did God create evil? To give people free choice. So he gives people free choice, the ability to choose good or bad. Now, if God doesn't want evil to be perpetrated in different ways, he'll stop it. If not, he'll let it happen, but eventually he'll stop it. That's what the Ramchal says. It doesn't go on forever. It doesn't go on forever. But guess what? What about the persons affected? Right, that's the $1.5 million question. But what about them? And what about their families?
The wake of disaster. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. You take this whole case that this guy here in Israel committed suicide after all these allegations came out against him, Chaim Walder, right? Just, his family has to go through it. His family got destroyed over here. But I know many rabbis, my rabbi included, said it has nothing to do with the family. The family's okay. He was the problem, right? So he abused popularity. He wasn't even really a therapist, whatever. He didn't have a degree or whatever. So he abused his position. In a lot of marriages, a lot of people got divorced because of it. So now you see one person, ego and everything else, involved in this whole thing, lives destroyed. Now, did these people sign up for that? No, of course they didn't sign up for it. But what happened? And this is one of the reasons many rabbis have come out and said that, if you have a male therapist, he should deal with men, not women. And there's good reason for that, because there are frail issues over here. And a woman can be totally broken and whatever. And this person can abuse his position, which, I'm not going to say it's not the first time it's probably happened. You have men teaching the women, for girls, teenage girls, or let's say 18, 19-year-old girls. Also, recipe for disaster unless you're very, very, very careful. You got to be very careful. But that's not even the point. The point is, people say this person, narcissist, ego, all these things, and he ruined lives. Now, what about the other families? Forget about the women. Happened to them. That's one issue. That's 100% one issue. What about their families that are left behind? You're going to say, but that's not fair. That's really not fair. So says Mori Verebi, Rabbi Governor Moshe Sturmach Shlita, should be well. And he says there are many times where, let's say, says the name of Rav Elio Lopian, oh bless him, everyone, the Torah giants of the last generation. And he says that there are times where a person could be liable for a death penalty, right? He could be liable to die, but people around him, family needs him, other people need him. So it's always good to work with others, in order to help others, right? So that's a good way to, hang on to life over here, because otherwise, if someone's liable for a death penalty, if you're not helping others, you could, it could just happen. And then you got the rest of the family picking up the pieces. But why do I mention that? That really has nothing to do with this. But why do I mention it? Because at the end of the day, when something happens, and it happens in a nasty way, who's left? Who's left? The family is the one that's left. So now, a person could say, but it's not their fault. They didn't tell this guy to womanize and do all these terrible things. What he did, what he was accused of. They didn't tell him to do that. They didn't tell him to act on it. They didn't say you ruined my mother, my wife, this. They didn't sign up for that. Totally didn't sign up for that. But you know what? So you can't say, wow, that's what their soul had to go through. Now people make decisions. People can be preyed on. There are predators out there. So we have to be careful. We have to guard ourselves. And, this doesn't necessarily have to do with what the soul has to go through. It could be things that we did ourselves. Because I think there's a Ramban, Nachmanides in the book of Job, I think says one of the friends of Job come and try and tell him, maybe did this, maybe did that. Maybe all the constellations were in a certain order when you were born, so you had to go through this, right? But the Ramban, I think it's the Ramban who says, person could go upstairs after 120 years and say to God, why didn't you stop me over here? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? God says, listen, you made a bad choice. Why do I have to stop you if you made a bad choice? I don't have to stop you. You did to yourself. So a person's going to claim, maybe many times, God, look what you did to me over here. Look what this happened, that happened. But you know what? God says, it has nothing to do with me. I didn't tell you to do this. You made a bad investment. You got bad advice. You didn't have enough merit to be stopped or whatever, so I let it go. But if a person's going to say, what, it's not my fault. What do you mean it's not your fault? Whose fault is it? But you're the one who runs the world. You're right. God's going to say, but don't I have free will? Don't I have the right to make choices? You're right. So what does the Gemara say? So the Gemara says, if you want to go in the right path, God will help you. If you want to go in the wrong path, God does not stop you. He doesn't have to stop you. But we're very quick to say, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Now, in general, if we understand what we're doing in this world, and the Avos of Avos and Duties of the Heart says, we don't do a quarter, a third of what we're supposed to do. So Coffman can give you a list of 20 things to check off before you go to sleep and say, did I accomplish this? Did I accomplish that? Did I accomplish the other thing? Between man and God, right? 20 things, 30 things, right? I'll be nice. I'll give you 10. If you go through that checklist and you tell me you're going to get a 75 or above, all the power to you, right? I can probably count on a couple hands, maybe, right? Forget about the righteous this generation, right? I probably count on a couple hands people who are going to pass. You're going to say, but we can't be too hard on ourselves. We can't break ourselves. I want people to look in the mirror and know what they do and acknowledge what they do maybe not be so good, right? The Ramchal, I just saw this last week. I was learning with somebody, the Ramchal in Path of the Just says, we all know we have bad character traits. We all know bad things we have to work on. But what about the good things we do? So a person does something good, I think I mentioned this before. A person does something good, you're going to say, fine, I'll continue doing it good. But the Ramchal says you got to work on that also. You got to make it even better. So even if you do it good 80% of the time, which is very good, I don't really have to think about it too much. Awesome. Problem is, he says, you have to strengthen that also. What are we going to strengthen? What are we going to work on? What we see, how, anger, giving charity, other things. We know what our bad qualities are. We should know what our bad character traits are. But to say I have to work on my good character traits to make them flawless? Come on. That's a different level. That's a whole different level. Now, most people hearing this would say, that's off the charts.
Yeah,
that's off the charts. And how many people would have thought that, the Ramchal or anybody is going to say, you got to strengthen your good deeds also. Mm. They're going to say, what are you talking about? I have to work on ego. I have to work on, my interpersonal relationships. I have to work on my relationship with God and how I pray and a million different things. You're going to tell me I have to work on what I'm good at? Come on. That's why you get professional athletes sometimes don't make it. They don't do as well because they rest on their laurels. Because they were good in college, it's gonna spill over. Or even if they were good at one point, they just get lazy. They don't want to work out. They don't want to train as hard, et cetera. So what happens? They atrophy. And then the career goes down. Trying to bring it back, but once the person's already been bitten by the laziness bug, it's hard. So the point I totally digressed here, and that's what we do over here, right? But the point is, when we look at these things, I just want to answer this question. When we look at these things, we have to see in God's eyes, and we have to see what goes on in the world, right? So if we see there are things that go on in the world that are not normal, right? Why should that be one major thing? Why should that be one of the major, one of the 10 commandments? Right? It's not a normal thing. Certainly,
it's heinous.
It's an abomination. Sure. Yeah. It's a perversion. It's less than 1% of the population, if that's right, of the world's population. I could be wrong. Maybe it's a little bit higher. Doesn't matter. It's not a huge number. I'm not saying it's infinitesimally small. Right, because they have a lot of power.
Any of it's too much.
The LGBT community has a lot of power and all that. So Could be, the numbers are higher than I think. But, again, we're not talking 20% of the world's population. I think that would be a little bit, I think that would be a little bit high, to say so. But even so, right? Even so, something that is a major perversion, right? The Torah states clear in the book of Genesis, a man will cling to his wife. It doesn't say he'll cling, to his male friend. It doesn't say that, right? Homosexuality comes later, right? That is going to be forbidden. So it's pretty clear. Marriage is defined by the Torah is between man and women. That's what it is. It's been totally abused today. And, the institute of marriage in general seems like a huge failure in general, because 60% of the people that get married get divorced. It's a high percentage. So I would tell people just live together. Don't get divorced. Don't get married. Otherwise you got a very good chance, that you're going to get divorced. But we have to see, what quote unquote the norm is, according to the Torah. So, the Torah, I'm just going to mention because, I just want to bring it home here. The book of Leviticus chapter 18 talks about all these immoral acts, right? It talks about immorality. So what does it say? It says, verse 6, chapter 18, verse 6, right? It says, any man shall not approach his close relative to uncover nakedness, I am God. Nakedness of your father, nakedness of your mother, shouldn't uncover. Nakedness of your father's wife, right? That's not your mother, right? Stepmother, right? Nakedness of your sister. Nakedness of your son's daughter, right? Granddaughter. There's a whole list over your father's sister, your mother's sister. Now, why would the Torah tell me something? Tell me something. You got to say, come on, does the person really have the hots for his stepmother? Stepmother's going to be at least 20 years older than you, right? Now, remember, back in the day, I'm going to show all my ignorance here, and everyone can laugh and whatever, right? Back in the day, there was a show called the Oprah Winfrey Show, right? Anyone who remembers. So she had a show on. She had 3 people on. She had 2 women and a guy, right? One woman was once married to this guy, and he got divorced from her and married her mother. True case. A true case. The guy married his mother-in-law. Why? I don't know. I want to sit there watching the show. It just happened to be on. That was the case. These are the people she's interviewing. Now, the Torah doesn't tell me things that are not, that don't happen. They're not like these far-fetched things that'll never happen. You gotta say, come on, if a person's in his 40s, or let's say better, let's say this guy's 32, right? He's 32. How old is his mother-in-law? In her 50s?
Usually.
Most likely?
Well, yeah.
Probably, right? Probably in her 50s. A 30-year-old, I can understand if it was a woman, right? And the guy's going to marry a much, younger woman, 20 years, 30 years younger. That I can hear. But why in the world is a 32-year-old going to be with a 60-year-old woman? Can't have kids. Not gonna, okay, maybe she doesn't have a period or whatever, she had menopause, fine. But whatever. Is that normal? Would we say that's normal? Not necessarily. We're not gonna say that's normal. But what happens? It happens. It was the case that happened. And now you could tell me they just made it up and it was a good story. And okay, but the Torah doesn't tell me cases that'll just make believe that have never happened, right? We do have a case. All right, I should say better. There was the case of the wayward son. Case of the wayward son. There's a whole discussion. There's a whole discussion if he was ever liable, that his parents ever, stoned him for drinking like a little bit of wine and like a quarter pound of meat or something like that. But the voice of the wife and the mother and the father have to be the same. They have to be the same height. All kinds of different things that'll never happen. Probably never happen, right? So the Gemara gives one explanation, says it never happened. It was something that never happened because you only have 6 months also. In order to kill the child. But in either case, one explanation is it never happened. So the Gemara asks, if it never happened, why do I have to learn it? What's the point of learning it? The point of learning is to get rewarded. That's it. Even if it didn't happen. right? But the Torah in this case, in immorality, right, in other things, they're not going to bring down cases that never happened. That never get. You might say, well, it's not so common. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's common or not. Do you think in the day, okay, forget the Romans, and the Greeks, and and after that, we're quote unquote more civilized now. Let's say, do you think people, let's say 100 years ago, 200 years ago, would have thought that the LGBT community would be as powerful as it is today? And transgender, nobody would have seen that coming. I can't
they carried guns
people.
back then.
People might have said and prophesied, yeah, it's only a matter of time. Right? In other words, the society becomes decadent. It's only a matter of time before this happens, that happens, the other thing. That could be. Right? That very well could be. But at the same time, the power that it has, and to come out against them is like, they'll tar and feather you, you're homophobic, and you're this, and you're that. If you believe in the Bible, it's forbidden. Right? It's totally forbidden. So the idea over here is there are things that a person can go through in a very negative way that has nothing to do with you. And I would think in a certain way, again, I've never gone through it, so I can't say, but I would think in a certain way, if a person understands that they were born against their will, they die against their will, in the situation, many situations they're put in are not in your control. We're not in control. Right? I'm drinking my tea here. Right, so I've been drinking this tea for a while. So my second cup here. So now, could I pinpoint exactly when I'm going to have to go to the bathroom? Never. You might say, 32 minutes, in 5 seconds I'm going to have to go. We're not in control. We have to realize we're not in control.
Are you saying you need a break, Rabbi, if you got to step out for the bathroom break?
No, I'm good. But I'm saying that the point, the point is, and again, I'm not a psychologist, so you can take what I say with a grain of salt. I think part of the healing process, well, we'll make it easy. Let's say it comes to psychological abuse. Let's say, parents never empathize, never give you too much love, any of these things, which can destroy a person also. Totally destroy a person. Now, if we understand according to Jewish philosophy, we understand that we're in this world, we have a purpose. If we understand we're not in control of just about anything, and we're certainly not in control of our parents. Now, let's say our parents gave us a hard time, right? Let's say they never learned what it means to really be a parent. So parenting's gone out the window. By them, totally went out the window. So therefore what? When you're down, they don't know how to show empathy. They never show love. They have high expectations, you never reach them. They tell you you're a loser. You should do better. You might. They're not inspiring you over here.
Heaven forbid, yeah.
So now, a person gets tossed around like that, which I'm not going to say can happen. Cannot happen. Certainly can happen. So now, what's part of the healing process? A person feels like a piece of dirt, right? An absolute piece of dirt, and they're compared to other siblings. Why can't you be like your brother? Why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you be like this one? That parents should never, ever, ever say, even if they think it. Even if they think it, you'll destroy a child. You'll totally destroy a child. But let's say all these things happen. All these things happen. So what does Torah tell you? Torah will tell you these people don't know what they're saying. They don't know the effect it has. But how am I supposed to heal from that? And what's the greatest advice that I was ever given, I think, right? Probably on a scale of 1 to 10, it's really up there. Top 2, top 3. Over the years was you have to look at people, that if they've never been brought up in Torah mitzvahs, they deserve to be in a straitjacket and go to Sing Sing. They're absolutely insane, right? But what they said is painful. What they said is hard. It's hard to hear. I had somebody tell me on the phone, they knocked me out like, took a sledgehammer, totally slammed me, and then denied what they said. So I never said that. Like, what do you mean? I just heard it with my own ears. And they said, I never said that. So they denied what they said. It was a really, below the belt comment, right? So I could have looked at it and said, that's devastating to hear, even though I already knew that. But when you have a mentality and you see, and you hear what people say, and they're coming out of left field. They don't know anything. They're just trying to put you down, whatever. Why would I let them in my head? Why would I give them a second chance in my head? Right? Now, someone explained this to me many years ago, and it took me a while to understand, and more importantly, to put it into practice. Why? Because if someone says it's a family member, let's say it's a brother or sister or a parent, and they say something well below the belt, and it's painful, and it doesn't matter if it's true or not. Let's say even if it's true, right? But they put you down. They put you down. Now, what happens? You feel bad about yourself. It's hard to, get yourself up in the morning because they knocked you down, and then they knock you down again. And it happens over and over. Different things. Now, if I understand this person doesn't know anything about anything, and they're just trying to put me down, then sticks and stones over here. They can say what they want. Why am I going to be affected? You're going to say because this is what they've done for a long time. They've done it over and over. You're right. We're not denying that. Psychological abuse is just as bad as physical abuse in different ways. Right? People disagree with me. It's I may not be 100% right. Fine. Right? But people can get destroyed psychologically. As well. So a person gets beaten down over and over and over again, and then you finally realize these people are nuts. I've come to Torah. I've come to an understanding. What's right to say, what's not right to say. They're never going to change. So if what they say, is painful, okay, you're going to have to deal with what they say. But if someone was mentally challenged, if somebody was mentally challenged, they have an IQ of a 5-year-old, right? And, and they bump into you. They slobber over you, right? Okay, I'm not going to say person should want that. Whatever. Something happens. You're not even going to give them the time of day. You might get annoyed. Very well might get annoyed. So what? It's someone with a 5-year-old mentality, right? So now you get somebody just saying this over my Shabbos table. Earlier, it was last night, or I was telling you last night, a person gets a degree, right? We all know what a BS is worth, right? Or a BA. An MA is just more of it. In a PhD, there are two different versions. It's either pilot higher and deeper, or Papa has dough. Right? So you can have someone who, let's say, it's got an MA, it's got a PhD, right? It's got a business degree, whatever. And, and they could have 100 IQ, 115 IQ. They could be brilliant. They could be a genius. And then they come along and say something, they knock you down, or they make fun of Torah, or this and that. Why in the world am I going to take what they say seriously at all? At all. If I were to tell them, listen, you're in charge of a hedge fund. You're in charge of $100 million, right? So I say, you know what? I got an idea. I want you to invest in this company. I want you to invest $10 million in this company. You know why? Because this company begins with the letter C. And my name is Chaim. My name begins with the letter C. So I want you to invest $10 million into this company. I said, are you ever going to listen one word I have to say about this company? So I had somebody once tell me they were lying, but, they said, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. I'm like, you're full of it. That's what I said. I said more than that, but I said, you're full of it over here because I'm telling you to invest $10 million in a company. And the only reason is because it has the same first letter as my first name. I said, I'm doing you a service, a courtesy. I'm listening to a 3-year-old who's trying to spew something about somebody who's got a PhD. You're not going to knock off Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking with an article you read on Wikipedia about physics. You're not going to do that. Nobody would have the chutzpah to do it. In Torah, it happens all the time. I saw Fiddler on the Roof. If I were a rich man. Who cares? You saw Fiddler on the Roof. The worst movie ever, the worst play ever created. All about assimilation. That's all it's about. It's about assimilation. I saw Fiddler on the Roof. I watched John Heston and the Ten Commandments. Well, you see him play, you also play John the Baptist. Want to cover both ends. Want to make sure he covered both sides, right? No big deal. You watch Ten Commandments. No, it's going to come up before Passover, right? The old Ten Commandments. People are going to watch it and feel like, get something out of it. I don't know, whatever it is. Nostalgia. The cardiac Jew, right? The cardiac Jew over here. Very good. What are they going to get out of it? Nothing. And then they're going to say, but I don't think the Torah is true. And the next world, oh, come on. You got to be a little bit soft to believe that. I got evidence. I can speak to you for the next 15 minutes, give it all very quick, all the evidence. No, I'm not interested. I'm not interested, but I know you're a fruitcake. Well, then why are you going to take that seriously? I know certain people, if I was standing on the top of if I was top of the king of the totem pole, and I was at the top, and everything was going great, I know exactly who to speak to who's going to put me down. He's going to knock me down. Oh, come on, if I breathe on your kosher burger, doesn't mean it's not kosher? You know what my answer was when someone said that? My answer was, no, it's kosher because there's bad breath on it. What do you answer to that? I'm going to get upset? I'm going to get upset because the person's an idiot. Oh, no, I'm just making fun. No, you're an idiot. I have to take what you say seriously? Oh, come on. You got a big ego. You think you know. You think you got all the answers. There are answers I know. There's a lot I do know. There's a lot I don't know. But I know one thing. My 10-year-old knows more than you do. That I know. And it's not a doubt over here. Right? So, yeah, you want to knock me down? I'll crush you. But, okay, I'm not going to draw that person closer. They're never going to listen. Right? They're never going to listen. But I'm going to make them think and say, oh, you're going to say something like, really? This is the best you came up with? Come on. And I'll tell them, I say, well, my 10-year-old could probably answer this. He says, yeah, probably could. But he's not going to take it as an affront. He's not going to take it as an affront because he made a Teflon. He's going to say, doesn't matter what you say. You're not going to get into my head. I'm not going to allow you to say anything that's going to get me off my track. Right? So now, if they say something to us, why can't we be like Teflon? Why do we have to be wusses over here? We have to take what they say seriously. Or we care what they say. I'm not saying you put them down, per se. You have to know how to answer them. Obviously, you got to be careful because they say, I never cursed you. I never said this, but what are they doing? They're trampling on everything you believe in. And when they trample on everything you believe in, it's very hard to keep quiet. Right? And everyone knows I got a big problem. One of them is I got a big mouth. I hate people who lie, and I hate people who misrepresent. But it's one thing for someone to try and ram something down my throat, and try and give over something and say, come on, you're a fanatic, you're this. I'm like, you want me to answer? I said, should I answer this? I go, this is what I do for a living, sort of. I said, you want me to answer? I said, I'm doing you a courtesy because what you said is absolutely ludicrous. It makes no sense, right? And when I answered, this person was intermarried, right? A Jew married to a non-Jew. So I said, how many times do you think the Torah says you're not allowed to intermarry? Right? 6 times, 10 times, 1,000 times. So then I said, maybe you'll tell me it's only for that generation. Maybe the generation going into the land of Israel. You come up with a lot of explanations, right? And so I said, I want to hear a source. Show me a source. Torah, Talmud, Medrash, Kabbalah, something that says what this says isn't true. Yeah, we'll say it's written by man, whatever. Okay, so why'd they write it? Show me something. And what was the answer? Because I know I'm only given like 10 seconds to give an answer. What was the answer? I don't have to answer you. You're a fanatic. I go, I know I'm a fanatic. I'm a lot worse than a fanatic. Just give me an answer. Right? And I pushed them. I said, just give me an answer. He goes, I don't owe you an explanation. That's it. So somebody comes up like that, I just knock them out. Very easily. Right? So what does this mean? No, I don't have to tell you. Oh, why you don't have to tell me? Because you don't have an answer. Right? Now, someone's going to put me down and say, yeah, you have too many kids. Yeah, this. And they'll bring me all kinds of claims. And they'll put me down. And they'll put Judaism down. They'll put my Rebbe down. You know what? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because, people like that, they got egos. They got big shoulders, or so they think. You know what? And they get the mentality of a 3-year-old, of a 5-year-old. Right? So they're going to make fun. And it used to be, I figured, I had to answer, and I had to come up with something, and this, and I felt bad. Why should I feel bad? Why in the world should I feel bad? And if someone even says something worse, you're a loser, you'll never amount to anything, and they'll beat you down left and right. Right? So you have to have you have to have shoulders. You have to have a backbone. Because what these people are going to do, they're going to say, oh, you did this, or you deserved it. Or this happened. Are you happy now? See, where's your God now? You're on your knees. He took away all your money, and you're struggling 17 years, all these different things. Don't think I haven't had people say that. And now you're religious. Look what happened. Look what happened. I got slapped off both sides. Monday morning quarterback. You should have done this when you had money. Oh, now you don't have money. You should be doing. Everyone's got an answer. Everyone's got an answer. But there's no empathy. right? So they say, oh, Nebuch. They say, Nebuch means like, Nebish. It's like, oh, come on. Like, you're really doing this, and I feel so bad, and it's so bad, and it's so this, and it's so that. So, can that grate on a person? Can that take a person off? Yeah, it can. Especially when other people could be around to help and they don't. Fine, right? This is good psychology for me. It's good venting, right? But the point is that if they're going to say something and they're going to degrade you, guess what? They deserve to be in Sing Sing. They deserve to be tied up and strung on a tree. That's the reality, right? They should be dead already. There's no question about it. So why am I going to take someone with a 20 IQ in Torah and mitzvahs, and I don't care if they put me down. I don't care if they make fun of me. I don't care what they say, right? I don't care what anybody says. You know why? I mean, I'm not gonna say anybody, but in general, if they don't have what to say in Torah and mitzvahs, they're not holding anywhere, and they want to make fun of my life. Okay, that's why I have two ears. Goes in one ear and out the other. Yeah, but it's family. It's a cousin. It's an aunt. It's this one. It's that one. So what? So, it hurts more because they're family. I had a family member tell me, I danced with them once at a wedding, and I told them that, afterwards, I became religious. I said, I saw them. I said, sorry, I can't hug you. I can't kiss you, whatever, and this person, like, they were totally offended. Okay, in my case, most things I can only do is damage control, right? But this person took it to another level. They're like, I'm not gonna have anything to do with you. If you can't hug me or kiss me, like, you can take your religion and stuff it. Like, not exactly that language, right? But it was pretty harsh. It was pretty harsh. And I sat there like, are you serious?
Yeah, intended
now, if
to
I
hurt,
was a
right?
Sikh, if I was a Sikh or a Hindu, they would have 10 times more respect than if I was an Orthodox Jew. They say, oh, that's a quaint custom. Why? Because it doesn't affect them. But see, they see what I represent. I represent the old country. I represent, quote unquote, old Torah. And they know deep down that spark inside them says it's wrong what they're doing. But what are they going to do? They're going to come out fighting like no tomorrow. It's like what the government here does, right? They're going to fight out again, trying to eradicate, Torah Judaism. That's their goal. That's 100% their goal. We see it all the time. See decree after decree after decree what they're doing.
In Israel.
Right. Why? Because they know, they know inside what's really right. And who are these people? They're part of the Erev. They're part of the mixed multitude. And the Vilna Gaon says in Evan Shlema, in his book, Evan Shlema, that the Messiah can only come when they get destroyed. Now, who's the Erev? Who's the mixed multitude? The Erev. We're going to read in this week's Parsha coming about the sin of the golden calf. These were the converts came out of Egypt or came out of other countries that, Moshe Rabbeinu took, and they converted, and they sinned with the golden calf. So the Erev today, the Vilna Gaon says these secular Jews in charge of, secular organizations, whatever, people in the Israeli government, etc. They're the ones, before the Messiah comes, they have to be wiped out. I'm not saying we have to kill them. I'm saying they have to die out before the Messiah comes. And this is exactly what's supposed to be. This is what's prophesied, right? The chutzpah of this generation. I'll give an example how far this goes. The chief rabbi, Sephardic chief rabbi.
Have you got a source for that, Rabbi? You said it was. Can you remember where?
Yeah, it's in. There are 15 signs of the Messiah coming. I think it's in Tractate Sota 49a or b, somewhere there. Tractate Sota. I can track it down. But I want to mention that the chief rabbi, Sephardic chief rabbi, Rabbi Yosef, son of Ravaji Yosef of blessed memory, and a number of months ago, made a statement, I think on the radio. And he was saying that there are all these non-Jewish Russians in Israel, which is something that's well known. It's well known. There are like more than 1 million Russians that came over the last 20, 30 years, right? And the vast majority, not almost all of them, are not Jewish. And they brought them in in order that they should offset the Orthodox, whatever. Without getting into politics, I don't want to get into politics, which I don't normally do. And he made the statement, and the secular media trashed him. How could you say such a thing? He should resign. He doesn't have a right to say such a thing. Freedom of speech. They can call us, cockroaches and other things and sponges. And we say anything. It's like, forget it. You're not allowed to say anything. So what happened? So he got hammered all over the media. And he said, I don't understand what you guys are getting so upset about. I'm quoting your statistics. This is from the Jerusalem, the Bureau of Statistics. It's coming from the Israeli Bureau of Statistics. I'm quoting your own source. What are you coming out against me? It's slander. What are you coming out against me? I'm quoting what's out there. I'm not making this stuff up. This is what's out there. Right? So where you have the most amount of holiness, you have the most amount of impurity, and you have secular Jews want to eradicate Torah mitzvahs. That's what they want to do. And that's what the state was founded on. Anyone who's ever read, Herzl's book, Herzl's famous book about the state of Israel, warning the state of Israel. So his goal, 100%, his goal was to uproot Judaism. So
Rabbi,
wrote,
can you slide to your right a little bit?
1 second. Yeah, he wrote the book, The Jewish State. That was his book. So his goal was that it shouldn't have, there should be a state of Jews, but have nothing to do with Torah mitzvahs. Right? I want to totally, uproot that. Anyone who wants to read the book, you can read the book. Right? But that was his goal. That's certainly the goal of the Reform movement, totally uproot Torah mitzvahs. That's how they started. So you get all these things. You're fighting, and that's what the world's fighting against. That's what we're fighting against. All this assimilation and intermarriage and all that, but that's where it starts. That's where it starts. But it's uncanny in the sense that we bring out their own statistics and we're flagged. They say all kinds of lies, and if Rebel Wine should be well once said, if you listen to what they say, what the media says about Orthodox Jews, ultra-Orthodox Jews, we're sponges, we're cockroaches, we're this, we're that. If you were to change the name ultra-Orthodox Jew to Arab, there would have been, civil disobedience or more. There'd be an uprising here. So we take everything on the chin. They say what they want. We say something using their own statistics. We get demolished, right? 100%. We get demolished over here. So the reality is back to what my original point here was, and that is that even if things happen to us, even if it's done in a way where, we're totally not in control, when people say things or whatever, and we get bullied, etc., we still have to remember things don't happen for no reason. But at the same time, I remember even when I was in middle school, when I was in high school, and I wasn't a religious Jew at that time. So when I would hear people say things, I'm like, why are you singling me out? Like, okay, I was a little more Jewish than some other people, but not really that much. And anti-Semitism exists, and anti-Semitism is its own topic, right? But, there were comments made, and these weren't stupid people. These were people, I would say much smarter than me, in many ways, and, many of them went to Ivy League schools and different things, very good, universities. So how can they be anti-Semites? I'm not saying 100% anti-Semites, but how can they say anti-Semitic things? Right? That was my problem growing up. I didn't understand how someone that intelligent can make comments like that. You say, well, kids are kids. But people should know better. They should know better. Now, I only understood, let's say 15, 20 years later, I only understood where all this came from. I wasn't given that information because I was never taught it. But 20 years later, in retrospect, made it, when I was in yeshiva, it answered up a lot of questions. A lot of questions. I mentioned this before. A lot of questions. So, when I became religious, I got married, my whole mindset had to totally change. And I was still involved, a lot with, family and family issues, and there were some serious issues, etc. And, and I got very good advice, right? So I'm giving over what happened to me so other people can understand, and see what the Torah perspective is. And the Torah perspective is these people shouldn't matter. I don't care if people say, blood is thicker than water. I can't even tell you how many times I've heard that. So what? So I have a relative who says, you're an embarrassment. How could you not even want to hug me or kiss me? That's an embarrassment to Judaism. An embarrassment to Judaism? What are you kidding? That's an embarrassment? That's what you call it, an embarrassment? So, there were certain things I would definitely say, and I would say it myself, I'm a little more sensitive. It's also true. But what happened was, I was so into Torah and mitzvahs, I couldn't believe how people just trample on it. People make comments. They might have been kidding. And someone said, yeah, I'm just kidding, whatever. But it's like a below the belt comment. I'll give an example. How far it goes.
No, you don't have to.
No, I got a good example, though. I got a good example. Said, oh, you went to yeshiva, right? A yeshiva is, guys live in a dormitory. Right? Guys live in a dormitory. So how many guys are there? I don't know, 20 guys, 15 guys, 30 guys, whatever. 2 in a room, 3 in a room, whatever it is. So what did someone say? It's like a below the belt comment. They said, don't worry, when if you're taking a shower, you bend over to pick up the soap, you better be careful. Someone what are you going to answer to that? Now, I use that as an example only because I want to see how crass people can be. Now, you changed your life. You believe in Torah mitzvahs. I have to be worried someone's going to attack me when I'm taking a shower. Now, can that happen? I'm not saying it can't. It can happen anywhere. You go into any community, Christian, Jewish, Muslim probably also. You go online, you can find out who the pedophiles are.
Derogatory, malevolent behavior goes on.
Yeah, it's all over. In Judaism, it exists also. Communities that exist in religious communities also. It's a disease. It exists. But I'm saying, if people can make such a crass statement, what would my first reaction be? What do you know about Torah? What in the world? Why are they saying that? Because they want to be funny. Because they want to make fun. That's why they're doing it. Right? They can think, come on, you're too sensitive. Okay, maybe I am. But why would someone make such a comment? So I can tell you something like that, I wouldn't even flinch today. I wouldn't even flinch at all. Because someone who makes such a stupid comment, I have to answer that? I feel I have to answer. I can put the person in the ground easily. Easily. I can say 2, 3 things. That's it. It's the end of the conversation. Put them in their place. What's it going to do? Nothing. Not going to do anything. But the point of all this is, regardless of what goes on around us, regardless of what people tell us, right? Doesn't matter. But a person could say, this happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever. We got beaten down. You're right. So a person either has to get help or they have to get it out of their head. And the longer time goes by in general, if I live the mentality, and this is the mentality we have to live with, and that is that God runs the world. God's in charge. And the question is, how do I react according to the Torah? Right? So I can be obnoxious. Someone makes a comment, family member says something. I can answer them straight away. Is that going to do anything? No. But am I going to let them get in my head and waste my time and say, oh, come on, you're such a loser. Look what you're doing. Look at this. Look at you. You have so many kids.
Sometimes that's easier said than done.
And you can't afford this and they put you down. Why am I going to listen to this? Why would I listen to this? Right? Life is hard enough. I need another hole in my head like I need another hole in my head. Right? I don't need it. I got enough aggravation. We all have enough aggravation. Right? But these people should not be given the time of day. Right? It doesn't mean we're elitist. Let's not make the mistake. When it's not talking about being elitist over here. What it means is I don't have to be a dish rat. I don't have to be trampled on. I don't have to be destroyed psychologically. And unfortunately, I've come across a lot of people, and this is what happens. Family said this, family said that. Other people did this, did that. There are things that are tragic. There are things that are traumatic. Right? But the mentality is God's the one who runs the world. But they said this and they said that. You're right. I've had plenty of people say things to me also. Family members, non-family members. You know what? I'm not saying it doesn't affect me to zero, right? But every single day, I'm not losing sleep over it. It's not something I'm losing sleep over. But when a person gets bullied, and a person gets psychologically bullied, and other things, I'm not saying you don't necessarily need help to deal with it. You might need help to deal with it also. And it can be a spiral effect right? But if I would have known, when I was in my teens, if someone would have explained to me all this, it would have changed everything in so many different ways. So many different ways. They're going to say, so why did God wait? Why did God wait to do it? Because I wasn't there and I wasn't holding there. And if I would have been holding there, it would have been a different issue, right? So now, years later, I'm telling you, when I was 20 years old and I was hearing different classes and different things, light bulb went off. Light bulb. And I said, that makes perfect sense. I thought I was brainwashed. It made absolutely perfect sense, right? Some people say, that's nothing to do with Torah. That's everything to do with Torah, right? Because it's all about how I act. It's all about what I say, right? But if I don't understand that God runs the world and God's putting these people in my path for whatever purpose, right? Then the question is, how do I react? Now, some people say, well, maybe I reacted the wrong way. I got demolished and totally demolished and I'm a shell of myself. That can happen. That can happen. But if a person has a higher reality, higher understanding, so now you understand where it comes from. And you're going to say, but how do I not believe what they say? I had a teacher told me, I was in art class. I was, 7, 8, maybe a little bit older, and how I would never amount to anything of the way I draw. Well, can't you make more effort? Can't you do this? I mean, like really put down. Now, I could care less about art. So that didn't necessarily, I don't think it came out. And I make fun of it because my, a number of my kids are, certainly much better than me in arts, no question. If you would have put me down and said, you're nothing in basketball, and you can't do that. Okay, then that's a different issue because that I was good at. Or in academics, I was good at. That's a different issue. You want to put me down for something that, in the bigger scheme of things, I could care less whether I draw a stick figure like this or like that or something else, and I have no creativity when it comes to art. It's probably not true, right? But a person get broken by it. You can absolutely get broken. A 7, 8-year-old. Imagine a teacher says that to you. Imagine a teacher says that. The person can say, I'm never going to be anything. So I'm just gonna listen to what that teacher says. Well, thank God I had other things I was good at. Because in the time that other things were being said, etc., I didn't have to listen to them because I had other outlets. But if a person doesn't have another outlet, then what happens is you get the Louisville Slugger. It's like bam, 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 and then you have no way to fight it, right? You have absolutely no way to fight it. But if you're good, if a person's good at other things, then these other things don't matter. In general, you have to deal with it, right? But you have different ways. You have different outlets. So, so then someone will say, but I didn't have any outlets. I wasn't really that good at anything. I took it on the chin and I just got beaten down in life. Which can happen. Which certainly can happen. But, I want to explain over here that there are things that happen in a person's life. And this, I repeat this a lot because it just comes up a lot. And that is, there are things that we're not in control. And the question is how we react. And sometimes things can be really bad. And people can say things, people can do things, people can be bullied, in many different ways, etc. So now I would say 90% of the game is I understand now how it works. I understand the bigger picture. Once I understand the bigger picture and I put it together like a puzzle, that's worth everything. Now, does that mean my life goes the way I want? Does that mean everything's easy? Doesn't mean any of that, right? And people say, well, life's not fair. Well, it's not a question about being fair or not. It's a question of you're put in certain situations. You don't have control. And the question is how you're going to react. Are you going to curse God? Someone actually asked my wife this question. When I lost all my money, someone asked the question, did you ever have any regret or remorse that you helped out all these people? Now, if I would have answered yes, God forbid, I would have lost all those mitzvahs. All those mitzvahs would have been lost. But I don't have regret. I wish certain things would have turned out differently. I wish I would have reacted to certain things differently. Okay, hindsight is 20/20. At the same time, I have a greater awareness. I have a greater understanding. It certainly made me into a mensch. I don't think there's any question. A mensch meaning that, now I understand both sides. Now I understand, I see people come all the time and
No,
that
I find it
they're marrying
personally
off children.
helpful, Rabbi. Yeah, yeah,
They're
very
they're
helpful.
marrying off children. It's a 7-child, 8-child, this, that, and they come collecting because they don't have the minimal necessities. Yeah, one second. So I can understand that. I'm also making a wedding, not so easy in many ways. But at the same time, what does God show you? God shows you like what happened to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was dirt poor. His father disowned him. His father's Kalba Savur had millions, in his day. And his daughter married a poor shepherd, didn't know anything, didn't know olive faith, right? And they were sleeping on straw, and they had very little. So comes along Elijah the prophet, dressed up as just as a beggar. He says, by the way, do you have any straw? And Rabbi Akiva thought to himself, at least we have straw. This person doesn't even have straw. Look how poor he is. Everything's perspective, right? Everything is perspective. And you say, wow, this person doesn't have this, or this person doesn't have that. So, I always say if God wanted to, we should never ask this. God wanted to, it could be a lot worse, right? You see people that are sick. The Vilna Gaon sent his students to the hospital before Shabbos because they were dirt poor, but they weren't sick. And they came into Shabbos totally different. They saw people who couldn't feed themselves, people who couldn't get out of bed, people who suffered that way. So we got to be thankful for what we have. Would you like things to be, given to you on a silver platter and all? Yeah, we'd like it a lot to be easier, but that's not how life works. Yeah, you had a question before?
Yeah, because you really brought and honed this right around into that position where we are not in control. But how does that balance with the question of free will? I mean, because I think more like when you're thinking, say, messianic era, I think that the definition of free will is going to be publicly understood in a more responsible light. Because the reality is we are not in control, as you've really brought out today. And I think you did a beautiful job because Hashem is in control. But, that
does not negate the fact that we have free will.
Right. But free will becomes only responsibility. It does not mean that free will doesn't mean that we have control in the sense that you just said we do not have control. I told my kids
a story over Shabbos, which, very hard to explain if you've grown up in a religious, neighborhood, your whole life. And when I was, in studying the conservative movement when I was 18, so there were people there, myself included, started keeping kosher and whatever. And a friend of mine tells me one day, it's like, I have this non-kosher urge to eat, pepperoni pizza. So we're trying to encourage him and this and that, and his urge just totally overcame him. Totally over, he was possessed in a certain way. Gotta have this pizza. No, you don't have to. Whatever, right? But in the end, did he have free will to eat that pepperoni pizza? Absolutely, he had free will. Now he chose,
which is a responsibility, right?
It's more than but listen, there's a whole question understanding between right and wrong, right? There's a lot of relative factors in between. If, according to us, according to the Torah, it's black and white, right? God gave the Torah, passed it down to Moses. We have to keep it all. It's not about if I feel like doing it. It's written by man. There was a committee, 4 authors and a redactor and different things.
No.
If I don't believe it's absolute,
if I
don't believe it's absolute, then I can do what I want. And then I can make it up as I go, right? But if I do believe it's absolute, it's a different issue. I don't have choice. I have to keep it. And if I don't keep it, there are repercussions. There are definite repercussions. But so this person absolutely has free choice. Now, you could tell me, how do I know the Torah is true? He says don't cook a calf in its mother's milk. What does that have to do with kashrus? You could start asking all those questions. But you know what? So now I'm going to age myself. So you go back more than 35 years, right? I go back more than 35 years. This person asking the question grew up as a Reformed Jew. Okay. So this person is saying he's got this non-kosher urge. Is he thinking about the bigger picture and how Torah works and it's from heaven and all that and all the intricacies and all the philosophical mumbo jumbo? No, not at all. He's thinking about filling his stomach with a pepperoni pizza. That's what he's thinking. And he's not thinking anything more than that. God gave the Torah. He didn't give the Torah. So that's the vast majority of people today. right? That, you trickle down 30 years later, 35 years later. It's not about having an unkosher urge or not. What difference does it make? People are going to say. What difference? I eat a pepperoni pizza. I don't. It doesn't affect my life at all. Now, how are you going to explain somebody, that's apathetic? It's what happens when a Jew eats non-kosher. It makes them apathetic. It's like trying to start a Jeep with a 9-volt. You're going to explain you are what you eat, even if science hasn't proven it. They're not going to give you the time of day. You're not going to have a chance to answer, right? But the point is that we all have desires. We all have desires. Are people really thinking the bigger scheme of the world, and how it works, and reward and punishment, and if there is and there's not, and whether we're going to do something? No, nobody's there. It's all about whether I want to do this, I don't want to do that, and that's it. That's all it's about. It's about nothing else. It's about my own desires. Period. That's all it's about. It's about nothing else. So today, in today's world,
we're bombarded.
Doing outreach is a whole different thing. Because it used to be years ago, you'd have a lot of people coming to Israel backpacking, looking for meaning, different things. Today it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different thing. It's trying to change someone's mentality who's been brain dead by society. Which I always say the most important question maybe ever asked is, do I put ketchup or mustard on my hot dog? Am I going to be out there trying to convince all the people not to watch Super Bowl tomorrow? No. No one's going to listen. Maybe you have a few people say, wow, you're really right. Really makes sense. What a waste of time. I should sit and learn. Yeah, you should. Forget about the stupid game. Forget about the commercials. Bible, right? Forget about all these things. It's all irrelevant. It's all there to be a distraction. That's all it is. But you know what? It's a good distraction. And it's a fun distraction. And maybe, technically speaking, for Jews, it's not that much wrong with it except wasting time when I could have learned Torah. That very well could be. Very, very well could be. But at the end of the day, if I understand what I'm up against, and I understand how it works, now I'm fighting on a different level. But if I don't understand how it works, if I grew up in the prairies, right, or I grew up as a potato farmer in Idaho, no offense to anyone who grew up in the prairies or a potato farmer in Idaho, and they didn't know their elbow from their leg or their nose or anything else, what's God going to say? He's going to say, well, how come we don't look in the world? He's going to get punished, depends what they did and the severity, which we mentioned many times, right? But somebody like that, you're going to convince them, clearly why to keep Torah mitzvahs. A lot of people not interested. They won't give you the time of day. They won't give you the time of day. Now, I'm not going to say it's a total waste of time. Cousin of my wife would say propaganda never goes to waste, right? But the main point to take from all this, and see, it's going to be a part 18 because I didn't even hit anything, just got totally off topic. But the point, the point is that I don't care if it's family, I don't care if it's PhDs, I don't care who it is. If someone gets put down, for their beliefs or for who they are, or in general, you have to have a backbone to say what you say is irrelevant. Because if not, you're going to start believing the headlines, and then you're going to fall into depression. You're going to get involved in other things. So it's a good thing I had a head on my shoulders, and I had a backbone, and maybe a little bit of an ego also, right? I've been accused of having a big head. Okay, right? But if I didn't have that, I would be a lot worse off. But not only that, but I had great people behind me, great people building me up, saying, what do you care what these people say? Forget about what they say. Don't have any contact with them or have minimal contact. Like my Rebbe would say, your goal is to sit and learn. That's what you're supposed to do. Learn as much as you can, give over as much as you can. And I'll tell you as we're ending here, there were a number of times my wife said, listen, things are hard. You have to go back and ask him, should I be doing this? Should I be looking for something else, right? Maybe, CG work. I don't know. Looking for something else. Whatever. I know there's not too much money, but okay, right? So he looked at me and he said, your goal is to learn. That's what you should be doing. There are other stuff, okay, put your best foot forward, and you keep going. Now, there were certain times that, that he said, okay, it might be, if you find something that works out this way, that way, he gave me advice, gave me advice what to do. I'm not going to say it was easy, not at all. When you're being thrashed around, and, making a living is hard. But on top of that, you got all these people, in the background hammering you in general, speaking out both sides of the mouth. and you're getting knocked down, there's no empathy, there's no help, there's no nothing. That's a little bit hard to take. That's a little bit hard to take, right?
Sure is.
But at the end, if you understand what your purpose is, and you're learning, you keep going, you just, energize the bunny, you just keep going, you don't stop. Doesn't mean you don't have to put bread on the table. Doesn't mean that, right? But last week, I think I mentioned, last week I had my whole family together, and my newest, son-in-law to be. I had 18 people there, right?
Wow.
I had my table
Full
all the
house.
way out, 4 leaves, and okay, I told them I'm going to get you earplugs because it gets a little bit loud, with 6 grandkids and whatever. The oldest one is 8, but okay, so you got a lot of younger ones as well. Learning how to. It's funny now because I got, my grandson's 1 started like walking around getting all kinds of trouble. Like opening up things and this and that. You gotta find him. He's like, oh, yeah, what are you doing? He's like, comes running out of the bathroom, with like tissues ripped up and who knows what. So that's all part of, So someone would say to me, when kids live nearby, they come in, they take this, whatever. It's like, it's chaos. I go, that's the most beautiful chaos there is. That's the most thankful a person can be when they see all that. Doesn't mean life is easy by any stretch. Doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
Right. But you have to look at it from a different perspective. Now, some people will say, wow, you have a beautiful family, this and that. Well, I wouldn't want so many kids, and I wouldn't want, it's not for me, but when they see it, how can they not see? Yeah.
And when they have the attachment themselves with their own,
does that mean it's easy? Does that mean my house isn't a mess and there's not a lot of noise? It's a whole package.
Rabbi, you got one question on there from Sandra Thorgren. She's asking about your friend. Yeah. Did he eat the pizza eventually?
Yes. He gave in. I think he gave in. That was the story. He gave in. Right. So you're right. I guess I should have finished the story. But in the end, people can look at it in different ways. They'll say, "Oh, you're insane, and you're this, and you're a fanatic." But when they see it, and they see that the kids have respect, and they show respect, and they talk nicely, and they have good morals and different things, you cannot say, "Oh, it's just luck," right? I've heard people say, "Well, you're lucky." You're right. It's more than luck, though. You put your best foot forward. You don't know how they're going to come out. Even the most religious of areas, you don't know, right? You don't know, but. But in the end, perseverance, hard work, living in the world of hard knocks, we have to know how to take it. And we have to know how to deal with it. And we have to know the alternative is worse. The alternative is worse. We want to be here. We want to fight for life. We want to fight for Torah. We want to learn as much as we can and not get distracted, right? And not get distracted with what other people say. Because at the end of the day, people not steeped in Torah mitzvahs, we don't care what they say. And the people may say, well, that's big ego talking. Why would I care what they say if they don't know anything? Why would I take what they say seriously? I wouldn't. They wouldn't take what I say seriously in their field because I don't know anything about the field. Right? So they're going to say things. They're going to put you down. Let sticks and stones. Let people say whatever they want. But you know what? We know what the truth is. We know what the bigger picture is. And when we know what the bigger picture is, I have to take it from my mind. Where's my football helmet? Take it from my mind, right? Put it in my heart. Right? There should not be that disconnect. But it's hard. It's definitely hard. But if not, then they have control. They absolutely have control over you. And nobody should ever have that kind of control and be in your head. Right? If someone wants to be healthy psychologically, they have to, these people, whoever said or did anything, have to get out of your head in some way. Now, it could be, the person has to go through therapy and other things. Very, very true. Right, that may be very true, but I think 90% is realizing it's not about me. I didn't sign up for this, and it wasn't about me. So, based on that, we're going to see chapter 2 of Mishna, part 18.
Part 18. Totally so Hashem willing, are we aiming for next week, Rabbi? Is your schedule allowed?
Go through, and we'll see part 18 next week.
Next week. All right. So there you have it, folks. I think we're going to have a part 18 next week, same time, Hashem willing. Well, Rabbi, we hope you have a beautiful week. We look forward to everything you have to share, and thank you for today's lesson. So, on that note, I got to sign up because we got our final lesson with Rabbi Poston. He's been doing the 48 Ways to Wisdom, and we're on our final lesson in that series. Starts in about half an hour, so we're going to sign up for now. Have a wonderful, wonderful
Wait a minute.
week.
So does that mean next week I go for 3 hours, or is he doing something else?
Well, he's talked about it, but he hasn't given me any feedback yet. But Rabbi, he does mention he has said in this class quite often, especially when watch you go, and so I'm sure. I'll let you know when I know for sure. But he's thrown a couple ideas, but he also doesn't. The class is beyond the 7, so he's trying to teach things that are open and Noahides that are technically beyond the 7, but are within boundaries, and so how hard that can be sometimes. So he's trying to find something that he believes is a nice package class. So, anyways, but this 48 ways, is out of Pirkei Avot, chapter 6, Mishna 6, right? It's just huge. 48 ways, and this will be our 50th lesson in that series, and that's been over a year and change doing that, but it's been a journey, but it's been well worth it. I mean, there's so much to understand, and I figured you'd be 122 by the time we got to that one, so that's why
if we get to chapter 6, you never know how long that's going to take, but we're still we're still only in chapter 2, so like I said, you're right.
The good thing is 2:9
extra life. I'll be 125. We'll get there.
Right, chapter 2, but Mishna 9 is actually a much smaller one, right?
You're right. So there's no shortage. There's no shortage of what to talk about. So we'll see. We'll see how it all. It could be some are shorter, some are easier to deal with. In different ways. So we'll see. Doesn't mean every mission is going to have 10 parts, 20 parts, or whatever, right? Well, we'll see how it goes.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time. I know you're really helping me out. It means a lot to me, and thank you for today's session. So we're going to sign out for now. We will be back with part 18 next week, folks. So have a wonderful, wonderful week.